Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Test, Optimize, and Scale. It's a pleasure to have Eric Holtzclaw with us here today, Chief Strategist, Dojo Master at Liger, guiding businesses to find their identities, core values, craft their visions, and establish their brands. We're going to talk lead gen, common misconceptions around marketing from entrepreneurs, mistakes that are made. My favorite type of episode as a marketer myself. Eric, thanks for taking the time. It's a pleasure to have you on the pod.
Thank you so much for having me on as a guest.
Love the background, love the full video setup that you have. You can tell how carefully you guys craft everything it is that you do, from your brand to the funnels that you set up. Looking forward to hearing everything about that, but thought we would begin with your story, your background, and creation of Liger.
Okay, so I'm a recovering technologist. So I ran development shops early in my career, kind of more of a geek, and then worked for some Silicon Valley-based companies in their professional services organization, establishing professional services around those categories. Owned a research company for about 10 years, sold my interest in that, swore I'd never start another business, and started doing operational work for a bunch of other people who were trying to scale theirs. So I was in kind of helping them scale their business, and they would give me their marketing department as part of that. They'd be like, hey, so while you're here, would you run marketing? I'm like, sure. And I'd get the operations working, and then I'd still end up owning the marketing component. And I had 6 companies I was doing marketing for, and a long-term person that I've worked with. I was on my way home, and she was like, it's not a consultancy anymore. You've got like 6 jobs and you really need to turn this into a company. So I merged my business with another business to form Liger. So because Liger is a combination of lion and tiger. It's also Napoleon Dynamite's favorite animal from the movie, if you remember.
That's right.
And so we have a lot of our culture and things are around the movie. We have a disco ball in our space. We do, proms, and we have a conference room. One's called Tater, the other's called Tots, like those kind of things. So I tell people that Liger was my accidental company. So my intent was to start it and sell it pretty quickly. And then, of course, we had the tariffs that came on board in 2019, which impacted my ability to sell the business because we were going to sell it to a business that had a dramatic sort of financial impact from that. And then the pandemic happened and all that. So as us entrepreneurs say, the rest is history. So here I have an agency that I have had to figure out how to optimize, scale, and test. So there you go, right?
There you go. There you go. And I know you've done a lot of writing on the topic as well, too, unlocking the potential of consumer behavior, really diving into the psychology of why audiences do what they do, which I think are steps that are missed by many marketers, many founders.
Yeah.
That are just looking at the return on ad spend or return on marketing spend. But there's that underlying foundation for a marketing funnel, for a strategy that is so important. Where does that all begin for you when you're taking on a new group at Liger or just advising, on a speaking engagement, something like that? Where does the discussion start on marketing strategy?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of why my background is interesting, because I did technology and then I was in research, and now marketing is a combination of technology and understanding your customer, and putting a good message on top of it. And we start off with all of our clients, taking them through a pretty comprehensive discovery process we call brand therapy. So we want to take who they are as a company and sort of pressure test it against, macro and micro trends, who are their ideal customers, where they're trying to get in the next 2 years, and how do we build all those marketing strategies and tactics to make sure that we're ultimately helping them move the needle. Because if marketing doesn't help you move the needle, then it's a waste, right? It's not, no one's going to be happy with it at the end of the day. So in that process, we learn a lot about what clients know about their customers. Like, do you even know why they buy from you? What is the message? How do you stand out from your competitors? And that drives what we're going to do to make sure that we're not just being the same, right? Like, I mean, the biggest problem with marketing is putting out something that's just background noise. We want something that's going to, create a visceral reaction that people are really going to pay attention to. And you have to deeply understand where that company fits as it relates to both their ideal clients and then also their competitive landscape. Like, what's going to make one person choose you over somebody else?
So you do the background research, leveraging your history in tech, being able to have that, at the forefront of the discussion. you start understanding the touch points of those audiences. Where do they go online? Where else are they converting? What type of messaging are they actually going to act on? How do you start determining what the funnel looks like from there? And the
Yeah.
funnel is an interesting concept. I mean, especially today, we're just saturated with marketing, branding, messaging, advertisements everywhere that we go. So
Yeah.
it's almost like a marketing maze. I know you guys like to put it in that fashion. I think it's very true. How do
Yeah.
you start determining where to take that audience down to be able to effectively measure conversion?
Yeah. So we are doing the brand therapy session as a way to discover a lot about the company, what they think of themselves, where they fit. And then we come back to them with a set of strategies and we tell them based on the company, where you are and the money you have to spend, and it's typically 2 to 3 things that they're going to pick. Here are 2 or 3 ways we can take this to market. And if it were our company and our money, these are the ways we would spend it. So we think about this just the same way we would if we were basically owned the company at the end of the day. And then once we get the client to make that choice, that starts to drive some of the tactics. So like, are we going to do a thought leadership approach, which means that we've got to do more around PR and our media? Is this going to be something that, is based maybe on referrals, right? So like, are we going to have to work into a referral network? So marketing is so complex nowadays. There's not a one size fits all. And even, thinking within one category because one competitor might be doing one thing and really already be dominating that. You just you try to avoid it. Like, what can you do that's going to be different, make you stand out? Like, how do you, think about it in a way that we're looking for green space? Like, what's the location that we can put you in that's going to let you really shine? Mostly the companies we work with don't have they don't have the marketing budgets of the big companies that we're so used to seeing. So they have to be very judicious about what they're spending. And so in that, you have to make choice. Like, you need to be very succinct about who your brand is, where you stand, what you say. And so that's what we're uncovering to then make the recommendation back to the client and then hold their feet to the fire and remind them of the choice they made. So it's like, you decided that this is your voice. This is what you're going to look like. Example, we were working with an insurance company and we gave them the choice of going to market as an artisan brand or as a hero brand. And those are 2 totally different ways that you would sort of go to market. One's going to be more of a, colorful, painty, like that kind of thing. The other is like these stories of, success and whatever. And they've chosen rightfully the hero brand. Most of the people who kind of came to that company under acquisition, were ex quarterbacks in their football team, and they really understand how to be that kind of persona. And that allows us to then decide what tactics we're going to put in place.
So, artisan, hero, where do you start seeing it live in the content, and how do you create content that converts? I get stuck in conversations with founders quite a bit around performance, direct response versus branding conversation, if you will.
Yeah.
Hey,
Right.
we're looking at the cost per acquisition, the return on marketing spend. We just want results. And I have to go back and state, hey, content marketing, this is what boosts conversion rate. Statistically, traffic sources are going to produce better perform if this is in play. And being able to talk about the branding and going through the brand therapy session, determining the audiences, and then having it live in content. How can you position that discussion to be able to show that light at the end of the tunnel, if you will?
Yeah, that's the tougher discussion, because when we do the brand therapy, the first 30 days are a lot of fun, right? Like, so we spend this time, in workshops and talking about their brand and who are they and, words and imagery and all that. And then we move into what I call the pit of despair. And so for the next 2 to 3 months, it's the pit of despair, because we're building all the base things in place to make sure that that's going to start to convert and do the things they need to do over time. So it's like building a house. You have to build all the frames and those kind of things before you start to stand up the walls, and people get impatient. They're like, the house is never going to be done. And so we kiddingly tell our clients, we're like, okay, we're done with the fun part. Now we're going to move into the pit of despair. Be patient with me, because you ultimately want conversion. We have a thing called BACCOM. So it's branding, awareness, traffic, conversion, optimization, and maintenance. And every single client wants conversion. I get it. You want conversion. But if you're not getting any traffic, I can't convert it. If we don't know who you are, awareness, then I don't get traffic. And if your brand is wrong, then it's going to impact our ability to get awareness. So we have to drop them back and understand where they are. So if they come in with a strong brand, maybe we can immediately move to awareness. They haven't been creating content, they haven't been out in the ecosystem, or they've been paying for everything. We may have to then focus on awareness. And once we now know that we've got traffic, we can then start to think about conversion. Conversion might be that somebody's ready to buy. Conversion also may be that they just raise their hand, finally give you their email address, and are willing to see a demo, right? And so that is the talk track I have to use with clients, because when I spend money in marketing, I want conversion. I wish I could pay money and then immediately have somebody come in, but I know that I've got to do all those other things. And content is the thing that pays you over time. So like where social media a social media post has a very short shelf life. SEO, sometimes you don't have as much control over it as you would like. But content, you can start to see the slow burn. So if you put up a good piece of content, it runs over time. You need to judge it over time as well. So you can't post something and look at it in the first 30 days. You need to look at it over 3, 6, 9 months. Like, how's that piece of content performing? And if it isn't, rework it or get rid of it. But you also have to make sure you've given that content enough time to be successful. So often I'll find companies who've built some really great piece of content, and they follow there's 20% creation, 80% promotion. Most companies are spending 80% of their time creating and 20% of their time promoting. They'll go, stand on a stage or do this big white paper or a webinar. They're like, oh, I'm so glad that's over. I'm like, no, the work just begun. Just because you're done doesn't mean you're done. Like, from a marketing perspective, take full advantage of that amazing thing that just happened and get it out there so that people who didn't get to experience it or weren't even in the buying cycle at that point get to participate.
Before, during, after, you were talking about being on stage. That's what I like to stress. And really, as you mentioned, the content creation is just the first part. I like that 20-80. So if you're spending 20% of the time developing, 80% of the time distributing, and really looking to get third-party distribution. Yeah. I do articles for the Forbes Agency Council, and I'll see the differences in traffic, even with a publisher like Forbes, where if there's not much sharing, peer-to-peer marketing occurring, I may get under 1,000 views. Where other articles, it's 40,000 plus, and I'll look at the links, and it's over 100 people who've talked about it on Twitter and posted it here and posted it there. How can you stimulate distribution, peer-to-peer marketing? How can you really get the most out of that 80% of the time that's focused there in regards to the content?
So it's a couple of things. One is repetitiveness. So just because, like, I have 160 articles on Inc., and we will reshare an article that I wrote years ago that has an evergreen component to it. And I'll have people come up and they're like, oh my gosh, I love the article that you just wrote. And I'm like, which one? And they're like, the one about this. And I'm like, okay, well, it was relevant to you today. It wasn't when I published it, because I published that article like 4 years ago, right? And so just because you're bored with it, just because you think you've done it, doesn't mean that it's not relevant to someone in their shoes that day. Like, one of them's like, the top things, good managers always do. Well, maybe somebody's out there that day because they've just become a manager, or they think their manager sucks, right? And they come across my article. And it's because not necessarily that they've searched for it, they see it on social or somewhere else. So it's that repetitiveness of the sharing. It is also give to get. So like, if you're working with other people that also contribute and spend time creating content, like, as you start to comment on their things, share those things, those people will come over and do the same for you. So, it really is about building community. It is about, not all about me, a little bit about you too. So how do you build that give and take to take advantage, and talking about topics that potentially, you want to talk about topics that your industries that you focus on care about, not necessarily your brethren, right? So like, I go to conferences that our customers go to. I don't always go to conferences that my fellow marketers go to. So like, because that makes me unique in the room. Like, I'm the marketer who works in that industry versus being just another marketer in a room talking about marketing, right?
Sure. I think I've been to some of those marketing conferences that you're referring to there, and definitely blend in, where to be the niche marketer for that vertical in the room can go a lot further. And I really like how you're pointing out the timelines of the content here. I was taught by SEO experts about content marketing about 10 years ago, and they told me uh, content marketing is the creation of good, engaging content that's designed for social shares and high authority links, high authority coverage from different publishers. That's physically why you do it. And SEO, as we all know, takes time. 3 months, 6 months at a minimum. You're talking about articles from 4 years back, even giving a large enough sample size over the course of 6 months. I think that's fantastic, and really the lens in which all founders should look at this. Not that quick ROI, but that long-term positioning, and what it means for a funnel to be able to point at the content from this week as well as from further points back in the database.
Yeah, I think about it as the same way I do my financial advisor. So I have a certain amount of money that I'm going to give my financial advisor every month. I expect my returns to be up and to the right. I'm not the guy picking the stocks or thinking about the things or whatever. And I'm expecting him to pick, a blended portfolio. So some things that are going to grow faster, some bonds. Your marketing spend is the same. Your content typically lives in the bond component of the marketing. So it's the thing that may not be the immediate pay, but it's going to pay over time. And then you may run into some stuff with some bigger deals where you put out either a high value piece or you do social or whatever. And those will be your kind of high growth components.
Absolutely. Can splinter it out to smaller pieces, can use it as a lead magnet that advertising is driving to for lead gen. I know you guys are specialists when it comes to this. What is the best way to approach lead gen? How can you look for higher quality when it comes to lead gen? I know that's what we're measuring. That's our clients really want. It's not just volume, but the actual quality. Do you have any tips? Do you have any formulas that you guys use towards higher quality lead generation?
Yeah, so it is breaking sites and information up by the audience. So instead of by, companies will build their website like a catalog, and they need to build it more like a magazine. So if I build it as a magazine, each one of the sections is more important or interesting to a different audience. And by getting that person into that content and serving them something that's educating them, I'm starting to learn about who they are to get them to raise their hand. And then it allows me also to retarget them over time. So I know if they've already visited some of my digital properties, they've kind of raised their hand that they're in interest, they have some kind of either search intent, then they're someone I should focus on more than just the general public, right? So you want to go from fishing in the ocean to fishing in a pond. So who are the pond that you care about? Who's that ideal client? What's the language? So like from a persona perspective, what words do they use? How do they think about, the product that they're buying or service that they're buying from you, and parroting that back to them in you language versus we. So many companies write their websites and their content and we, and you got to get away from that royal we. Everything you're writing that way can be turned to a you statement that then gets the person who's reading it to see themselves in it. Because that's, we're trying to not sell them, we're trying to get them to buy. And we get them to buy by believing that what we are providing is the solution to their problem.
Moving them right away from we, phrasing as you, speaking to the audience, what value you have for them. What about this concept of demand generation versus lead generation?
Yeah. Well, so that is what I find is interesting. So there's people talk about B2B and B2C. I talk about them as relational. So B2B is really relational marketing and B2C is transactional marketing. So a good difference is during the holiday season, I'm a total transactional guy on Instagram. If there's something that comes by that I could buy for my friends who already have everything, like I'm going to just click on that button and buy it, right? That's transactional. So people are just looking for leads. They've targeted me, whatever. Demand gen means that I'm over time, because B2B is more relational, meaning it's more dangerous. So it's going to take longer. So it takes 20 to 21 times to build awareness. And then at the time that I've now sort of seen your brand, understand who you are, you can start to move over into some lead gen activities. And money on one side or the other that's not spent well can be wasted money. So we find B2C companies or transactional companies rely too heavily on lead gen and spend for what they're getting in, and could benefit from some organic and demand gen components. where B2B typically leans too heavily into the organic and demand side, and it's hard to get them over and like start getting to spend on lead. In fact, we stood up a B2B display ad network this year, specifically because B2B needs to know the impressions over time, not just within a given time, so that we can look at it more holistically, and getting them convinced that we had kind of reached the outer ring of organic for them. Like, we've done as much as we can in organic. We're going to have to spend a little bit of money to, drive the traffic and continue to get it up and to the right.
Interesting. I haven't looked at it directly from that lens before, and I've had similar conversations with ad networks in the past. What are some other misconceptions that marketers have, whether they're your clients or, I know you've spoken to a high volume of entrepreneurs over time. What are some of the textbook types of misconceptions you see?
Well, if we think about classic B2B, they think brand isn't important. So they don't spend as much time or effort or energy on brand as they should. And their brand is just as important as any other, right? They have a lack of consistency. So they'll try something once and they're like, that didn't work. Well, you don't know that it didn't work. You just didn't, quote unquote, make a sale, right? So like, we got to like continue to do that. It would be like me going to the gym one time and thinking that I was going to be in shape, right? Because I did one workout. And this lack of consistency around their brand. So big companies do a really good job of consistency, and you know their brand before you see it. Small companies often don't, and they have less money to spend. So it's way more important for a small company to be really consistent about their brand, so you recognize voice, recognize the look, whatever, than it is for a big company, because they can't waste the what we're trying to get from an awareness perspective. And if you think about it, if I make the brand look too different from the previous time you saw it, your brain registers it as a completely different brand. So I need that repetitiveness that, in front of you over and over. And so by making a change, I'm in some ways resetting the clock and getting you to start over, because you're not expecting to see the brand the way that I'm now presenting it.
And I like how you said 20 to 21 times in terms of visits, and for B2B, I usually say 7 plus.
Yeah.
7 to 17 for all, I just say plus. It really is higher volumes these days, isn't it? With everything
It
that's
is. Yeah.
social.
Relational, absolutely. So used to be 7 to 10, whatever. That might still work in the transactional world. But and we know on the B2B side, the sales cycles are longer. There's a lot of risk. Anything that you're kind of making that decision, you can get fired, you can make a bad decision. Now you've installed a piece of software or done a thing that's you've got to live with, right? So they spend a lot more time in other parts of the ecosystem. They're not going to come to your digital properties until the very end. So you have to find them in places that you wouldn't expect and you don't have control over, and then try to entice them over to some of your digital properties so that you can start to, nurture them along that journey.
Sure. What other trends do you see in B2B right now, and over what lengths of sales cycles? Is it the 6 to 18-month sales cycle, search ads, highly focused, followed by display banner retargeting after a lead magnet and pointing at different pieces of content during that period of time? Are there other, other vehicles, other channels that are really moving right now? What are some of the biggest trends in B2B?
So with the risk of the recession, which we're not sure if it happened or isn't happening or happened, whatever that is, right? There's a lot of uncertainty. And so the sales cycles are longer. So we are seeing an extended sales cycle on the B2B side, which means that they're spending more time sort of keeping the environment, peppering it with messaging and those types of things. I almost think I'd reverse your model of trying to get educational content out in an organic manner, getting someone to like uptick on that, and then start to move towards display ads once they have raised their hand. That could be, it could be a way if you're brand new to get, new people in, but you sometimes, unless you're doing a really good job of retargeting, and most of the time our clients don't really know who they're going after. So they think they're, targeting the right kind of people, but then that may not be it. So I'd want to do that if I knew for a fact that they had good personas and good information on who their ideal client is and the language they use and those types of things to pull them into the funnel from a spend perspective. I like the idea of baiting organically and then seeing what works that way, and then maybe using some ad spend to determine how we can then drive some additional organic growth, because you can test on that faster, right? So yeah, educational content, high values, white papers, explainers, tell me how to do it, pretend like, give away all your secrets. Like think about your company as a magazine that's teaching me how to cook. But then when I read the recipe, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's hard. And I don't have all those tools. So I'm just going to go to a restaurant and buy it, right? Like that's really ultimately what you want them to do.
What about social media platforms for B2B? Are you seeing list uploads for ad targeting or any type of organic content to continue touching audiences that are in the funnel to be productive? Is that primarily on LinkedIn? Do you actually see it work on Meta and other platforms that are emerging among business audiences?
Yeah, LinkedIn is definitely number one with that. Then display search, those two categories, search intent works really well for us. We avoid the others because we're just not sure what kind of, for B2B in particular, we're going to get back unless there's some specific community they've built within those, platforms that make sense. And if you think about social doesn't always, it could be Medium, like you could put up a Medium article or you could do something on Reddit, like some of those things can drive traffic if you've got the right kind of audience. And sometimes we're doing stuff that's, technologists who use Reddit to like get their information or knowledge. So you just have to know for a fact that that's where the audience is. And we do advise that people stay on at least two platforms because platforms come and go based on the whims of their owners at times and things like that. And so if you've overinvested in one platform, you may find yourself with a dried up way of approaching your audience and you don't have something to like move to and start nurturing.
Sure. And I know it's case by case. I'm sure this comes up in the brand therapy session, comes up in some of the competitor marketing audits that you guys may do, and just deeper audience research that you were mentioning, so you get an idea of where that audience goes.
Yeah. And it's about the investment of like the dollars based on what they have willing to spend. Where do we think we can get the greatest impact? It's really optimizing the spend. Like, how do we optimize the spend and get something that's going to work and know that it may work for the next 3 months and we may have to change it because we're at a different, trajectory with the company. Like the people we were trying to attract 3 months ago have moved along. And so now we're attracting a different group. And that may mean that we need to switch up the tactics.
Sure. Speaking of tactics, want to ask you some questions to package actionable insights for listeners.
Okay.
So founders, if it's marketers, maybe VC industry professionals who are listening and researching what they could apply to their portfolio companies, what would you recommend for testing into the marketing model? This could be tactics. This could be overall formula, the brand therapy to begin with. But what are some different tests that they could look to implement into their own marketing mix?
So, the idea of if you're doing ads, putting out multiple ads at the same time and then killing them over time. So that's a kind of tried and true. If you put out 8 of them, run them for 24 hours or whatever period of time, kill them down to 4, kill them down to 2, and then run the ones that are really working, right? And know that it could just be placement of content or imagery. It doesn't even necessarily mean that you're changing messaging. I mean, I come from a research background, so I'm a strong proponent in qualitative research because I know that you can start to see patterns pretty quickly. So you can talk to, easily 18 to 24 customers and they'll start to repeat themselves if you do it correctly. And then that gives you a stronger sense of at least definitely what the long form content should include. We do crowdsourcing with our clients to come up with content. So we'll get them to tell us we'll say, hey, pretend like your company is a magazine. What would be the headlines within that magazine? And if you've got enough perspectives from your internal team and you use things like questions you've been asked by customers, either on the customer support line or on the sales line, and we can then cluster those into these pillars of content we can create and make sure that we're starting to address those over time. So all 3 of those give us an indication of kind of quick ways of getting to, a full content calendar and to start to see what's going to work and what's not.
You must be eliminating so many different tests and periods of time for your clients by doing that. Yeah. I really like that model of, hey, pretend your brand's a magazine. What are the headlines? How can we incorporate that into the ads and the different inventory that we have available to fill with messaging and or the content counter? Where can we dive in deeper here? I like that you're getting to the root of it in the early stages.
When it gives you a framework, because really what people always struggle with is like they don't know what to do next. So for establishing a framework around these pillars, like all the content we're creating, all the social, everything should live within that. Because again, as a smaller company or a company with not the budgets of the big ones, you have to be judicious with how you spend your money. And so it's better to concentrate in an area and then switch from that to maybe another along the way so that you're getting the maximum impact on that pillar that you're focused on.
Like you said, smaller brands, less budget, bigger brands, do more research. Should
Yep.
really be the other way around in terms of time spent on the market, the audience, and what you're putting together with your creative plan.
Well, and the bigger brands do a better job with consistency than the smaller brands do, which is crazy. Like you'd think that, they've got all the money to spend, but they know that they need to be super consistent in order to get the right kind of results.
The analytics have shown them that they keep
Yep.
doing it. I completely agree. And like how you pointed out earlier, that with any inconsistencies there, the audience feels like they're dealing with a new brand and you're actually working backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. You've reset their brain.
What about optimization? And this is what we get approached with on a daily basis, whether it's on our live campaigns and we're looking to improve, take them to the next level, and trying to get maximum performance out of every channel, every audience, every type of messaging, or whether it's a prospective group and they're not seeing performance. Maybe they've done some of these exercises on their own, but advertising content, it's just not producing for them. How can you optimize if things are not working right out of the gate?
So that is a time to do some sort of A/B split testing on, what those ideas look like. It's also a time, I don't know why people think it's so hard to do it, because running a research company and doing qualitative research, everybody always is like, that sounds like it would be really hard. It's not. I mean, if you do qualitative research, you can find out pretty quickly why something's not working. So you take the thing you're trying to do and you put it in front of the intended buyer or customer, and that could be somebody that you've worked with before, someone that you're working with, like anyone. They'll tell you pretty quickly, like they thought that word meant this, or that's in the wrong place, or they're just losing it. And there are a lot of platforms online now that allow you to do that quickly, through you can deploy it out to a panel. I'm not as huge a proponent of those. And the reason is you can't do good follow-up questions. So you get more into the what versus the why. And you need to know why that's not performing. You need to be able to ask I wrote a book in 2013 called Laddering about consumer behavior. And it focuses a lot on the fact that you need to ask the question why 5 times. So the first time you ask the why, they give you a really surface answer like, it's because of the price. No, it isn't. If it changes your world, does think that you'll spend any kind of money. We always make that an excuse, like, it's too expensive. No, it wasn't, right? So you got to get them underneath those things down to the core why of, do you make them look good? Do you make their life easier? Like, what is the kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, fundamental reason that they buy from or work with your brand? And that takes time and takes a conversation with that intended customer. And you don't need to talk to as many as you think you need to talk to get to the answer.
Amazing. I took a philosophy class, and 5 layers of why was part of the discussion. So to hear the 5 questions, and we work with some premium audiences on the investor side where we're targeting funds, we're targeting individual investors with equity crowdfunding, various types of vehicles. And they're not always as quick to explain why they're not moving forward on a deal, or even that clear on whether they will or not. And we're
they want to be
layers.
They want to be polite, and they want to, like, anytime I
Yes.
was doing it, I was like, stop being nice. Just tell me. I'm not going to judge you, and it's always good to have a third party who really doesn't have a vested interest, because it's like, look, I didn't build the thing. I didn't buy the thing. I didn't do the thing. Like, just tell me.
Yeah.
Right. And then you'll be amazed at what people will confess to you when you kind of get to that. That's why that book is called Laddering, because that is the technique of getting down, asking those questions and asking them over and over again, like a 3-year-old. You're like, why, but you don't take the answer because I said so. Like, you really want to get them down to like what the fundamental why is for them.
Sure. I imagine it's the difference from not just a successful campaign, but company.
Yeah.
To some degree, by walking through that process and what you could save in terms of budget, in terms of timeline, to be able to get to the result you need.
Well, and we know how many people silently vote, right? Like if you just never converted for some reason, but you don't know it because the person's like, well, why I'm going to tell you why I didn't convert or why I didn't do this thing or whatever. They just walk away. And those are the ones you want to know, as quickly as possible. Like, what was it? What was it in the offer? Was it the way that we approached it? And if it takes 27 times to convert someone, there's so many opportunities that you could break something. So it's 20 to 21 to build that awareness. And then they get with the salesperson typically stops at 3. They need to at least do 5 to 7 follow-ups. There's so many ways that I could screw that deal up along the way. So where did we drop the ball that prevented it from moving forward?
I like those graphs that show the amount of follow-ups it takes to close a deal, and then the reverse of how many follow-ups the average salesperson does, like you're mentioning 3, and the reverse of that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Most salespeople do 3 follow-ups. They need to do somewhere between 5 to 7.
2021 awareness, 27 total, including the follow-ups.
Yes.
What about when you dial this all down? What are the processes to scale from your perspective? And any tips, any examples?
So if you think about, do you want processes to scale a business or processes to scale marketing?
Well, I would like to think the marketing works in path to scale the business. Could speak to either or both.
Okay. So on the marketing side, it is understanding kind of who you are and where you sit in the ecosystem, such that you can double down on that and really owning it and being okay with it and turning weaknesses into strengths, right? So like, how do you make that work to your advantage? We have so many clients who come in who are apologetic about where they fit against their competitors. I'm like, no, you've got a unique point of view perspective, like own it, right? Like own that side of it. And it's in owning it and identifying your ideal clients that you start to grow. Like anytime you're going after that non-ideal client, you're wasting time on demos or sales or bringing them onboarding, and then they drop off. So you really do need to know who you're for as much as you know who you're not for. And you want your marketing to appeal to those that you are built for and to repel those that you're not. So how do you make sure that you're being very selective? There's plenty of room for lots of companies to make lots of money in these different categories, and you've got to be selective. So to scale, you have to narrow. And that sounds crazy, right? Like a scaling is about getting bigger, but it's about choice. So thinking of it that way and then just double downing on it. And as an entrepreneur who's running a business, it's really, really hard to say no to someone who has money. You're like, hey, I got money. It's like, yeah, but you're going to be a pain in the butt. So I don't want to work with you, right? And so you've got to start getting good at that and understanding that if you free up space within what you're doing, you have the opportunity to take your company to the level you want to take it to. Hard lesson.
Power of focus, power of selection, narrow down to be able to scale it and take it to where you want to, take it to the milestones you mapped out.
Well, and customers then know how to buy based on selection. So there's a lady that we worked with who was in the real estate space, and she sold only in 2 neighborhoods. And so every time she introduced herself, she was like, hey, I'm, Sally Sue. I sell I sell houses in Roswell and Alpharetta. And then another real estate agent would say, yeah, I'm such and such, and I'll sell you a house anywhere. And she's like, yeah. And they would reinforce my message, the fact that I only sell in Roswell and Alpharetta. So by doing that, she was limiting, and also those are great markets. So she was identifying a certain kind of buyer. She was identifying like where she wanted to spend her time. And many real estate agents would be really afraid to do that. They're like, oh no, I want any kind of business. And she's like, no, I just want this business.
Some real estate agents out here in Los Angeles that follow that model for specific neighborhoods, and they could certainly take on more. But like you said, the selection, the narrowing, and I'm a sucker for advertisements that focus Marina Del Rey, my neighborhood, Los Angeles. I feel like they're talking to me. They understand. They're more focused.
Well, we know, like you and I both know, like hyperlocal pages that do that kind of thing, like pest services in Marina Del Rey, or whatever, like, oh, that's for me, right? It's easier to find that. And that's kind of how people look. They want something around them specifically for certain types of services.
Absolutely. Now it backfires if they're not set up for it. If I go in,
absolutely. And it's a great way to get organic and not have to pay for it too. So yeah.
Stimulating the social shares, the searchability. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Eric, This has been a pleasure to speak with you. You are so well versed on B2B, creative, building these funnels out beyond what we talk about at our offices on a day-to-day basis. It is really a pleasure and an educational experience for me to be able to walk through all of this with you. As we begin to wrap up, I want to ask if there's any final thoughts that you want to leave listeners with, and if they'd like to get in contact with you, with Liger. They're going to want to listen to the Claw podcast, maybe even check out your book and articles, as you were mentioning. What is the best way for them to do so?
So the best way to find me nowadays is on LinkedIn. So I'm all over LinkedIn. I have a newsletter called Digitally Inclined that comes out once a week that talks about kind of marketing and tech and where those two converge. Love to interact with people there. So LinkedIn, number one. You can find the company at ligerpartners.com. So ligerpartners.com is our website. So all of those, and just understanding that marketing is a changing beast on a regular basis, and it's hard to stay up on it. So you need to lean into some experts to help you stay ahead of the curve.
That is a fact. That is what I'm always looking to do. I recommend listeners to reach out to Eric on LinkedIn. That is quite the invite there to do just that. And with that, I want to thank you again, Eric, for taking the time to hop on the podcast here. I want to thank listeners for tuning in. We will see everybody next time.
Thanks so much.